Hello fellow sanitation workers, I'm King Link and I'm here to review Diaries of a Spaceport Janitor. Now, Diaries of a Spaceport Janitor made a lot of waves when it was released. It was something new and unique and focused on an unlikely character, a janitor at a busy spaceport, one who wasn't doing the big action game. On paper, it's a compelling idea, especially the anti-game, though I will say after playing it, I'm not really sold on it. Now, let's just start with the look of this game, and honestly, Diaries of a Spaceport Janitor is a mixture of quality. There's a ton of character models out there, and amazing looking aliens. I really like looking at the crowds, but that's all they end up being. There's a vibrant world around you. On the other hand, there's not much else. There's items that look very nondescript, perhaps on purpose. There's shops that are okay looking, but to me, we really need to talk about the screens in the game. If you see those ugly magenta and blue images or the green flashing screens, it's supposed to be a billboard of some sort. Now, the devs have confirmed that the graphical glitch is intentional. It's what looks like Z-buffer fighting to me. And okay, I get the idea of having an intentional glitch in a game, but I don't think it looks good. People have thematic reasons for it, saying that it's due to you not having the right credit rating to see the screens or whatever, but nothing really fits here. It's just ugly and it feels a bit lazy. There's a number of things like this in the game that make me feel the game has a series of glitches or unfinished features and was just shipped as is. Speaking of which, I'll be popping up the UI a number of times here, and honestly, it doesn't look good to me. I mean, even the size of the character's inventory feels misshapen with an odd number of items, but an even row system. The objects just don't look right, and it just feels like it was a placeholder art made permanent. Even the player character itself is okay at best. You're in a world that has millions of aliens, and you're kind of a boring looking human with bluish green skin. Now, there is room for improvement here in the game. There's actually a really clever idea I came up with, and we'll talk about gender shifting later in that idea, and the problems that that system has, mostly how it's ineffective in the game system. But I was thinking of why not have a sleeve system, such as in the world of Altered Carbon, where you can change your form. And yeah, that's not here. Instead, you have just this character who never changes. And that annoying skull that makes noise all throughout this video. Well, let's talk about the story to talk about him. Now, the theme of Diaries of a Spaceport Janitor is really what's gotten people to talk about the game, and we will dig into the theme in a little bit, but let's focus on the story for just a moment so you can have a basis for it. Now, the entire story is this. Diaries of a Spaceport Janitor starts with a day where the player's learning the controls, process, and rules of the game, basically collect items and burn it. Then on a lark, she or he goes into a dungeon and it's empty, and yet the player gets cursed by this skull that's there. Now that's the skull that we see following you and making noises all throughout the game. It's a gameplay element. From here, the player needs to get rid of the curse and has to build this tablet. There's 3 steps to this to get 3 pieces. You have to get smut, porn, for 1 character, and that will get you a first piece. Really easy step. Then the second step is collecting 9 fetishes, 1 of each of the gods in the game. And my god, this is like the most grindy thing I've ever had to do. Not that fun, but wait, there's more. And then the player, after doing that, gets to dive into a dungeon a second time and try to get to a 3rd slab while being chased by... Honestly, it was a graphical glitch. I don't think I have a footage of it. I'll try to pop up an image of it if I still have that, but it's ugly and just adds to my thought about this game being unfinished or more glitchy than a final product. So after this point, the player has all 3 pieces, and then the player has to go get an adventurer to take on the curse. And there's 3 that I found. Now, one wants 5 semi-rare items. You can find them, but I only found 1 in my game. One wants an extremely rare item. You could probably find it with enough time spent. And 1 wants 600 credits. Now, we'll talk a little bit about credits later, as well as luck in the gameplay, but these are not common items, and honestly, you're spending time to grind just to get the money or one of the items. I found 1 of the rare items, like I said. I couldn't afford the very rare item. And, of course, the 600 credits, well, that is what I got. You'll see the numbers on the screen. If you get those items or credits, you get to see the end of the game. and then you wake up and the game continues. Now, I wouldn't give away the entire game, but the thing is, this entire game becomes an issue I really feel like I need to dive into eventually. I'm not going to do it just yet, but we'll get there. But let's talk about that theme of the game. Now, thematically, it's clear that this game is trying to make you feel like you're a downtrodden, poverty-stricken person. And that is where most journalists stop reviewing the game and just get on their socio-political soapbox and just go and talk about, their ideology. And fine, that's what got this game a lot of attention. Any reason to talk about your politics when talking about a game. I'm not going to, though. That's not what I do here. I'm actually more interested in why this doesn't work both as a game and as a political statement. Now, the fact is, for both of them, it's because of the other piece. It doesn't work well as a game because it's trying to make a political statement and thus thinks fun isn't important. And it doesn't work as a political statement because it's a game and thus must have game mechanics and thus win states. The biggest thing, though, is that if you're trying to make a statement on poverty and you're doing it in a gamified world, the reason why shops don't offer you a good deal isn't because someone's trying to rip you off or the society's at fault, it's a gamified system. Similarly, the shops are made really inefficient, and we'll talk about that in a minute, but that's because it's a game. No shop would work this way in the real world. There's no conspiracy or government trying to keep you poor. There's a game designer who made a political statement with his game, and that's fine, assuming it was intentional, which I think it was. But there's ways to make both a better game and a better statement. I mean, here's just two examples. The game Papers, Please is fantastic in almost every way, and the game This War of Mine is a wonderful statement, and it's grim, it's dark, but it's a good game. Now, both of these have important messages, but they're also entertaining. And with that, well, let's talk about Diary of a Spaceport Janitor's gameplay. Now, the game does start off with a few choices. You basically have to choose a deity to worship. I don't know how much it actually affects the game, and a few other things. Honestly, I don't know how important the early choices are, but you'll always appear as a lowly janitor in what appears to be, honestly, it's a rather nice apartment. I wouldn't mind switching my apartment out for that one, especially with that view. I mean, clearly it's not in this world, but you have a nice view and all, whatever. Your job has you wandering around the entire spaceport and using an incinerator backpack to burn pieces of trash you find on the ground. At least that's how the game makes it sound. There's another tactic you can use, however. You can collect the items and sell them to shops, or try to make money that way. In fact, selling items can be more profitable than doing your jobs if you know what to keep or what to look for. There's also shrines to deities which you can pray at, which will raise this luck stat you have, and lotto machines that will give you a free item, usually something worth some real cash if you sell it to the right person. But this is where we have to talk about those shops that I called problematic. Imagine walking into a GameStop. You'll want to sell your Wii U for a PS4, let's say. Great. And today they're selling a PS4, an Xbox One, and a PC. Excellent. Except that store won't take your Wii U because they're not selling it. What? That sounds strange, but then they'll say, come back tomorrow, we'll sell it then. Tomorrow, they're selling the Wii U, an Xbox One, and a PC. So suddenly now you can sell your Wii U, and they'll give you almost nothing for it, of course, but then you want to go buy your PS4. Except it's not available because it's not on the menu today. You'll have to come back tomorrow and hope it's available. It's not guaranteed because that's not how this works. Now, this sounds like a crazy idea that would never work, but it's how every shop in Diaries of a Spaceport Janitor seems to work, and it's really dumb. This kind of makes no sense. You can sell like scrap plates to a shop, but not the scrap bits, and then the next day they'll buy the bits, but not the plates, because that's just not sold today. Sometimes shops will constantly change types as well, so you have to hunt for someone to buy your doodads, or more likely just burn it because you don't want to deal with this system. Now, some shops are always around, like the gem shop, the banks, and the magical patches, but the majority of shops do change daily, and it's a frustrating experience. But overall, people give the advice to only sell weapons, and I get it. They're the only things of value in the game you'll find, because otherwise it's a random chance at a few extra creds. If you can find a seller, of course it will work out, but it's not really worth it to really play with this economy. Of course, you'll have to use the shops because there's also food, and this is another problematic element that is gamified something that doesn't make a lot of sense. Now, most people in the real world know what makes them sick, and even if people eat unhealthy food, they have the good sense of how to not vomit. You know, it's self-preservation. We've learned how to eat relatively healthy. You know, let's be honest, we all eat unhealthy food. Sadly, our main character doesn't have that sense, though. So you have to guess what to buy and what to eat, and it's not always clear how hungry she is. It's visible in the upper left if she's hungry, but it's not telling you much more than she wants food. You can't go to sleep if you're hungry, so you have to eat a bunch of stuff, and maybe you start vomiting when you pick something wrong. It becomes this whole system. The thing is, there's a number of these hidden values in the game, like hunger or food, the power of the incinerator, which is kind of shown but not in a reliable place, so you don't know what's draining the power, that vomiting scale, if we'll call it that, and then there's this gender switch scale that you'll see in the upper left of the game a lot of time, and we'll talk about that in 1 minute. The problem is, though, by the end of the game, like about 30 to 40 game days, I still didn't know what food to buy or what food not to buy. Now, this is something that the character should know by this point in her life, but the food that sounds tame and safe sometimes made me throw up for no reason. Is this because of random chance? Is this because of a bad deal? Is this just a way to annoy the player? Well, probably it's not intended to be the last one, but it certainly succeeds at that. And it's an annoying game element, as is most of the system here. Now, before we get to gender shifting, which we will still, the money becomes a major game element as well. You might burn 20 items a day and get 40 credits, or 10 credits. There's not really a reason why the difference in value, and I'm sure there's some specific rules in the games, but that's not a good business strategy. You know, hire someone and just give them a random amount of money, and not a good game element either. It's just random numbers to me. The incinerator's power goes down because of maybe time, distance travel, uses. I'm not sure which or what combination of them, and there's no way to extend the power or recharge it without going to sleep, so it's another game element. And let's talk about that gender switching game element. I think it's problematic to say the least. So every so often, the player feels the desire to switch his or her gender. Now, don't get me wrong. I understand some people feel that they're the wrong gender, at least on paperwork, or want to switch between female or male, or don't want to identify as either, or want to unlabel or label as something different. Whatever the situation is, I will respect that. That is your choice. And that's fine, but I think a majority of people, like 99.99% of people, have a specific gender or lack of gender in mind. They don't want to constantly change. The problem is, in Spaceport Janitor doesn't just want to change, but constantly feels like he or she, or it, because some of these genders are just objects, has to switch. Every couple of days, the game says you should switch genders. Now, the game's visuals slowly skew a bit, and it's very clear that something's off with the graphics, but that's it. Now, you can pay for a gender switch, which you'll spend some of your money on, which is a random choice, though, to a random gender. You always have something trying to be humorous, like I remember Spiky was a gender. There was a celebrity, I can't even remember her, but it was something like Betty White is now your gender. It's randomized, though, and overall, it's humorous for a second, but not that interesting, and expensive. So, I find this to be a strange concept because I don't think anyone in the real world has it. The feeling that they have to constantly switch. But also, as a concept, it's easy to ignore with what appears to be very little negative effects except a little less visual quality, and yet the game doesn't look amazing to begin with, so honestly I stopped switching genders. It's just a money sink. But this is where the idea I mentioned earlier could have worked. The sleeve system in Altered Carbon could have been a discussion of being elitist. Your sleeves maybe wear out faster because you buy cheaper ones, but imagine becoming different characters or races here with each switch. That would be really cool in my opinion. That's not how this works, and I think the system as it is here doesn't work both as a game system and also as a statement. And that's really the problem as I keep going on. So many systems here are game systems because a game you can't win isn't going to do well. But making those game systems that they've completely destroyed the theme and idea of being a poverty-stricken person because they want you to be able to win. I mean, Like I said, I believe that the luck stat doesn't do much, and okay, that's an interesting commentary on people who believe in luck, but I've also heard others who say it does matter somewhat, and in my experience, maybe it does a little bit. So maybe that's an intentional thing that just doesn't work that much. The fact is, your character can get out of poverty, and by the end of the game, in just like about a month's time, I had amassed what seems like a small fortune, not a ton, but about 600 credits, and that's supposed to be enough, and that's me amassing that as a cursed person. And I got that even with every game system skewed against me, and that kind of becomes the problem. Society itself isn't against me in the game, the game designer's very visible hand is what I was fighting against. Now, there's of course other stuff in this game, like the idea that you want to collect containers to give it to a random guy, but it just becomes repetitive and a grindy task, which honestly most of the game of course feels like. The container guy will keep telling you, give him more, and that's all he does until you hit some magical number. I believe it's about 150. I never actually got that much. And you see, that's the problem I have with Diaries of a Spaceport Janitor. It's trying to make you feel bad, it's trying to evoke feelings, but you don't feel for your avatar, you're just going through the motions to beat the game. I mean, there's a ton of games that have similar issues, like I've talked about. Papers, Please, and The War of Mine have already been mentioned, but there's also an interesting game called Spent. Now, this was a game put out by the Urban Ministries of Durham, and that was just a game about poverty. There's, of course, Darfur is Dying, and others. There's even stuff like games like Headliners, talking about a bunch of socio-political issues, but doing it in a game system. And if you want to focus on just janitors for some reason, Viscera Cleanup Detail is at least more interesting and fun than this. It's actually a pretty unique game too, and I think it does a better job. The thing is though, there are games like Spent, which it's not a great game, but it's a focus on an issue and wants to talk about that, but it's given away for free. And on the other hand, when you're buying a game like Papers, Please, maybe it's not a fun game, but it's interesting, entertaining, and makes people play multiple times because they feel invested and want to know more about this game. Here's the thing, Diaries of a Spaceport Janitor doesn't do either of these things, and honestly, after I've been playing this, I'm kind of glad I'm done with this game. I'm doing this review for you because I really didn't enjoy the Diaries of the Spaceport Janitor and only kept playing so I could tell you about these problems. I finished the game, and yeah, I don't think it's worth it. It's a great game to review if you want to talk about poverty and need to somehow link it to a video game to post it on your site. But as a game itself, or even as a message, it really falls short of whatever it's trying to do. Ultimately, I give Diaries of a Spaceport Janitor a 1.5 out of 5. And here's the thing, I don't just dislike it, I get the feeling this is a game where someone's going to come out and say, well, it's supposed to suck. And fine, but like I said, you can make the life of a person unpleasant without making the game itself unpleasant. I recently talked about Hellblade: Senua's Sacrifice. That's a great game, but honestly you constantly feel bad for what Senua is going through, because you connect with her as another human being going through something heartbreaking. As for our little janitor avatar, yeah, it's not the same. And that's ultimately what I don't enjoy about Diaries of a Spaceport Janitor, because it becomes too much of a game, but a game meant to be purposefully unpleasant. It plays that victim card so hard and so often, but it doesn't really understand what it's playing. And that is Diaries of a Spaceport Janitor. Honestly, I've changed a few things in my life, so I'm more likely to just stop playing games that I don't like. I've thought about how to cover games like this, and we'll see. I mean, the thing is, I don't want to spend 20 minutes making a video about this, let alone the 10 or so hours I have to spend making a review for something I'm not enjoying. With that said though, if you did somehow like this, or you'd love to know that I'm playing games I hate, well, let me know. Maybe I'll do more, but I doubt it. If you did, however, enjoy this review, or you want to see more reviews of games that I do enjoy, consider subscribing. I do have something coming up, not officially a review, but we'll talk about that when it comes out. Until then, I'm King Link, and thank you very much for watching.